Of the 11 Finger Lakes in upstate New York, Seneca Lake takes center stage. It's pretty much in the middle as the seventh finger out of 11. It's the largest finger lake and the second longest in length at 35 miles, just shorter than Cayuga. It's very deep, in some places more than 600 feet. Major maritime traffic took place on all the Finger Lakes in the 1800s, including Seneca, where transportation between Watkins Glen and Geneva was heavy. Steamboats and barges transported people and goods continuously for decades, and some of those vessels ended up sinking. Because Seneca is so deep and cold, plus the fact that it's not salt water and the bottom holds a temperature just above freezing, it made it a perfect environment for preserving wooden shipwrecks. People have always wondered what's down there, but it wasn't until recently the lake began giving up its secrets. Thanks to technology and the expertise of my special guest in this interview, Arthur Kohn, a nautical archaeologist with decades of experience with local lakes and maritime history. He's an affiliated scholar with the Institute of Nautical Archaeology with Texas A&M and co-founder and director emeritus of the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum. Hi, Art.
Hi, how you doing?
Great. Thank you so much for being here. And I understand, Art, that you've done a series on what's at the bottom of Seneca Lake. Is that right?
Yes, for the last 4 years, I've been working with the Finger Lakes Boating Museum in Hammondsport and a number of New York State agencies, the New York State Museum, the Division for Historic Preservation, the DEC, and in particular the Canal Corporation and Power Authority, to systematically document and explore the bottom of Seneca Lake.
I cannot wait to see what you found hidden on the bottom of mysterious Seneca Lake.
My study with canal boats began almost 40 years ago, actually more than 40 years ago through my work. I was working as a diver here, and you couldn't help but interact historic watercraft because Lake Champlain, like Seneca Lake, was an extremely busy maritime superhighway. And so where you have lots of boats traveling over a long period of time, some of them end up on the bottom. These shipwrecks are kind of every place people traveled on the historic waterways, and we now know that they have the potential to yield an incredible amount of focused information about the past, particularly when you use both the three-dimensional shipwrecks themselves, the archaeology, and you combine it with the historical record, and you put those two lenses together, you get what I've called the best time machine that we currently have to travel back and understand the way past societies operated. In my career, I also decided that it might be very interesting and effective for people to see full-size working reproductions of these boats modeled from originals. In other words, a nautical archaeologist, what we do is we measure and study and draft everything about a boat on the bottom. We back engineer a set of plans and have determined from those plans, we can build models, we can do drawings, and in fact, if the plans are detailed enough, you can actually build a clone of a boat from history. We began building this boat over 20 years ago in Burlington, Vermont. We launched it in 2004, shown here in Burlington, Vermont. And then what we think we had accomplished and what our goal was to take this historic watercraft, which had been quite a common boat. And if you'd have seen it in its day, you probably wouldn't have given it a second look. These were working blue-collar boats. And you can see from this photograph, an old-timer on Lake Champlain with its sails patched and, trying to eke out a living as it's competing now with railroads and highways. And we wanted to recreate this in our time, and so we've done that. This is a really good illustration of the fact that we went really to build an original. We didn't try to build an improved boat. We tried to build a boat that if you were wanting to get into the business in 1860 and you ordered one of these, it could be the boat that we built, and use it as an exhibition space where you can see the public was invited to come on board. And by coming aboard the boat, it whet their appetite to want to know, what is this boat? What did it do? When did it operate? We could tell them that this boat, unlike tractor trailers today, this boat was operated by families, mom, dad, and the kids. And they lived on the boat in the stern cabin that was the mobile home for the family that typically operated this boat.
How they moved through the canals, was it mules pulling them on each side?
No, on the canal, on the canal, yes, it was horses and mules, only pulling on one side.
Oh.
The side that they called the towpath. And from that towpath, the draft animals would walk with about a 300-foot tow line coming back to the boat. And that was the power source to move the boats from Albany to Buffalo and everywhere in between. And it worked that way for almost 100 years. So we're back at Geneva now, 20 years later from that first historic Geneva photo. And what's really interesting here is if you look to the right of this bird's eye view, you see a big steamboat, a much bigger steamboat than the earlier steamboat, pulling 25 canal boats at a time. This is the way that canal boats typically traveled from end to end, whether they were going south to Watkins or north to Geneva to enter the interconnected canals. This is how they traveled on the lake. And so the typical explanation for why there are boats on the bottom of Seneca Lake in such large numbers are you moved a lot of boats, typically loaded, and when the wind blew and the surface water got riled up into waves, and those waves escalated into whitecaps, a percentage of these boats couldn't handle it and went down. And that's really the explanation for why we have this extraordinary collection. The other thing that got us to want to do this survey is the recognition that in 2023 and 2025, we are celebrating and commemorating the 200th anniversary of the opening of the Champlain Canal in 1823 and its more important brother, the Erie Canal, in 1825. And that bicentennial offered us an opportunity to add to the known story and help commemorate it by creating new information. And there's a legacy of this extraordinary canal system all around us. And it's such a fabulous way to explore the landscape and get outdoors with your family.